Hey guys, this is Good. Welcome to my review of Spider-Man, the 2002 film. Yeah, I got a lot of light going on in here. That's a little bit too much light. Just trying to let some sunlight in here. It's good for your skin and it's good for you. I usually live in a cave, so my room's usually just a cave, pretty much. So, but anyway, check this one out again, and well. Let's just say I don't hate the movie, but I don't love it like I used to. I used to love this movie a lot. I watched this all the time as a kid. It was a big film for me. This was a huge event in 2002 too. This is huge. This is in many ways a cultural event in the year of 2002. This is like an event that everyone in the United States really all over the world really got into, especially in the US. Finally Spider-Man after all these years is getting a movie, which when I found out later, of course, and I just did that video about why it took so long and what we could have gotten, this is this definitely does look a lot better in comparison to those other ideas. But what I'm getting at with this movie is, before I get into my thoughts on the film, I want to talk about the phenomenon. It was a huge phenomenon. It was as close as we could probably get to, uh, the phenomenon that Batman had in 1989 when it came out. It was big. It was massive. It was just the hype. People were just super, super excited. It set a record for the most money made over an opening weekend. $39.4 million. That's nothing nowadays, but back in 2002, that was huge. And then it became the first movie to ever make $100 million, I think, on its opening weekend. So it was huge, huge movie. I remember, actually, it was one of the few movies that I remember. My family and I actually saw it on opening night. We went and saw it on Friday, opening night, when the movie came out. And I remember, we waited in line for hours, and this just line that went all the way outside, down to the street. And you had kids who were, bringing their Spider-Man action figures. You had all this craziness. You had a guy who dressed up as Spider-Man. You had multiple Spider-Men showing up for the showing. You had kids. One of the kids asked the guy who's dressed up as Spider-Man, the typical sort of question that cute kids always ask. I remember it because it's like kids say the darndest things, really. This kid asked one of the guys dressed as Spider-Man. He's like, "Do you eat flies for breakfast?" I mean, that's totally something that a kid would ask, and it's it's funny. And so a lot of the guys who dressed up as Spider-Man, though, they had to unmask themselves in order to watch the movie because they couldn't see through the eye mask. They couldn't see through the eye holes in the mask very well. So huge, big thing. And I remember when I saw it in 2002, I loved it. But I was a lot younger then. And now, as an adult, as a 25-year-old, it, it's there. It's not terrible, but it's not really a great movie. It doesn't deserve a 7.3 out of 10, in my opinion. It just isn't that great of a movie. 50 minutes of the film is just origin story. The action sequences feel rather tame nowadays. The end fight, I thought, that was really badass between Spider-Man and Goblin is really more of Goblin kicking Spider-Man's ass than anything else, which is really disappointing, seeing that now for what I remember, and then seeing it now and then be like, you know what, that wasn't badass at all. Spider-Man just got his ever-loving ass handed to him by the Goblin. The best he could do is pull the wall down on him with his webbing like it's some Scooby-Doo trap cartoon bullshit. So yeah, just not impressed as much as I was, and just the tone is just so corny. It's okay for the '70s live action TV show with Nicholas Hammond, which is funny about Speaking of that, Nicholas Hammond, he has a cameo in this film. So the guy who originally played Spider-Man in the '70s TV show, live action TV show, in the late 70s, from 1977 to 1979. He's actually in the movie in a short little cameo in the parade scene. I didn't see him because I wasn't looking for him, and it's probably like a really blink and you miss it type cameo, but he's there. And that's another scene that really doesn't hold up very well in retrospect. It's really, honestly, pretty lackluster. There's not much done with it. I mean, Goblin shows up, throws a goblin bomb, turns these people into skeletons, and then the fight, the stuff, the sequences, the fights with Goblin and Spider-Man and everything afterwards is just kind of lackluster. And I do agree with what Nostalgia Critic said in his latest video where he talked about old versus new, Spider-Man and the new Spider-Man. And he said it looks like a stunt show, and it does. That whole sequence looks a lot like a stunt show at Universal Studios. So, and it's just the movie itself is not. Excuse me, there's something in this case, which I get really picky about stuff. For some reason, there's a hair in here. Get out of here! There's a freaking hair in my Spider-Man case. Okay, but anyway. There we go, Spider-Man. Without any hair in the DVD case. How the fuck did that get in there? Anyway, Spider-Man, going back to the whole sort of, the movie itself. Like I said, it's 15 minutes of origin story. Yeah, you do have the stuff with he's wrestling as the human spider, or as Bruce Campbell says, the Amazing Spider-Man! Hey, you got my name wrong. It's a human spider. The human spider's lame, kid. It was like, yeah, it is lame. Bruce Campbell is right. And then you have the whole sort of thing with the wrestling scene with Bonesaw, played by Macho Randy Man Savage. Macho Randy Man. Randy the Macho Man Savage. Macho Randy Man Savage. Randy Man! That's horrible. God. Shame on me. Anyway, he plays Bonesaw, Are you ready? It's like, Bonesaw is ready! It's so over the top, and the whole thing is like, I got 3 minutes of playtime! Let's go! I could watch that scene, though, and, that actually had some decent kind of funny lines from Spider-Man. Peter Parker, who's dressed up as his first costume as Spider-Man's really cheap looking, of course. A t-shirt and like a ski mask, red ski mask, and he's like, "Oh, I like that costume. I like that costume. Did your husband make it for you?" that was actually pretty funny. So I mean, hey, there's actually some decent, funny moments in here. Some that I thought were funny as a kid, but are cringe-inducing now, like the scene where he's trying to get his web to work, and he's like, go, web, fly, up and away, web, Shazam, go, web, go, tally-ho. It's just really corny. Like, see, that's a cornier joke than anything in the 70s show, in the 70s live-action TV series. I gotta be honest, I'm watching the 70s live-action TV series, Nicholas Hammond, and I'm enjoying episodes of that show more than I am this entire movie. It's just this movie, to me, it just hasn't aged that well. It's one of those movies I think really has dated. Like, even more so than a 70s live-action TV series. It's a 70s live-action TV series. Hey, it has certain 70s charm to it, and it's from the 70s, so I can kind of give it a little bit of a pass when it comes to some sort of limitations in terms of its effects and the clothing and the whole way it's approached, the approach it has and everything. That's dated a little bit too, but that's dated in a good way. In my opinion, this one is dated not in a good way at all, because the way that Raimi approached this film is trying to make it like the Steve Ditko comics, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but he has this whole 60s sort of sensibility with the way the characters, especially Peter Parker and Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and a lot of people are portrayed, but in a 2002 type world. And also it's really dated too, because you have Macy Gray performing at the parade. Like, Macy who? What, is she the person who created Macy's, the department store? Macy what? But it's got this 60s vibe to it in certain scenes. But then it's also got a modern, it's got a, with the Goblin, it's kind of, the Goblin especially is a character that I don't think was done justice properly. The character might have been a little bit more memorable than Dane DeHaan's performance, but it doesn't mean it was good. I mean, he was just really over the top, and to the point where it was entertaining, but for all the wrong reasons. It was entertaining, but for all the wrong reasons in my book. It was really bad acting by Willem Dafoe. And what's interesting is that we could have had worse. The original casting idea for Green Goblin was Billy Crudup. Billy Crudup! They thought Sam Raimi and Sony were thinking Billy Crudup is the Goblin. Then eventually they said no, you're too young and decided that's not going to work. But that was their first choice. When they thought of Green Goblin, Sony and Raimi, their first choice was Billy Crudup. What goes through their mind? And then they tried to ask Nicolas Cage. Can you imagine Nicolas Cage as the Green Goblin? That could have been classic. John Travolta. They also asked John Malkovich. They also asked Robert De Niro, if he wouldn't mind playing Robert De Niro as the Green Goblin. I don't see it at all. And then the last person they got to try to be the Goblin before Willem Dafoe was Bill Paxton. And Sam Raimi actually was and Bill Paxton was not really thinking he'd be a good choice, and actually took Sam Raimi sitting Bill Paxton down and convincing him that he'd be a good Goblin. So I guess Bill Paxton was going to do it. Then something happened. He dropped out, and Willem Dafoe was like he did like a screen test while he was doing something in France, filming some sort of. He was in France doing something. He did a screen test for the character, and that got him the part. So Willem Dafoe wasn't even the first choice. And also, speaking of other choices, the director, the original choice wasn't Sam Raimi. They tried to get other people, James Cameron, because he did he did really write the treatment. He wrote a little treatment later, but the one that he actually got sort of his name on and got the film in production, I guess at least pre-production was not his script. James Cameron. Tony Scott was one choice, which I think would have been interesting to see his vision of Spider-Man. Jan de Bont. Yeah, instead of awful haunting, he could have done Spider-Man instead. I don't know about Jan de Bont as directing Spider-Man. And a few other choices. But those are the more Roland Emmerich was one of them as well. But eventually they went with Sam Raimi. And now another casting idea they had was actually they were considering for Spider-Man, and this was during the whole phase with what is it with James Cameron's Spider-Man. So they're actually thinking about having maybe Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio was considered for the role of Peter Parker's Spider-Man, which I don't think would have worked. And then Stan Lee was interviewed and saying that his perfect choice for Spider-Man would be John Cusack, which I don't know. I mean, I like John Cusack, but I can't. For me personally, I just can't see John Cusack as Spider-Man. But he'd probably be better than Tobey Maguire. And then you had the whole thing. So there was a few other actors. I'm just trying to find the trivia. There was a few other actors that they were considering to play Spider-Man. And a few of them were some actors like I don't really remember much of anything that they were in. Another director was offered the director's chair was Chris Columbus, but he declined it to do Harry Potter instead. Leonardo DiCaprio, Freddie Prinze Jr., Scott Speedman, Jay Rodan, who I'd never heard of, and James Franco, who actually went on to play Harry Osborn, actually tested for the role. Tobey Maguire was pretty much hired because Sam Raimi liked what he did in the Cider House Rules and thought that he was exactly what he was looking for in Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Thought that role was exactly what he was looking for. And Tobey Maguire liked the script. And he even admitted that he had never read a comic before. He had never read a single Spider-Man comic. He just read the script and liked it, and that's why he did the film. And I think that shows a little bit to his performance. It's not terrible, it's there, but you don't have this genuine sort of passion for the character or for who he's playing. It just seems artificial. And I think with Andrew Garfield, night and day. Andrew Garfield's, his portrayal of Peter Parker and Spider-Man just feels like he actually genuinely cares about this character, and he wants to do the best he possibly can with it, especially with Spider-Man. You can tell he loves playing Spider-Man. He loves this character. You don't get that feeling with Tobey Maguire. You just get the feeling that he's just doing a job. He's getting paid, and he's just doing his best. And it's not terrible, but it's just there's no sincerity. There's no passion with it, in my opinion. And it makes sense because he wasn't really a big fan of the Spider-Man and never really even read any comic. Never read a single comic before. So, other choices for casting, which really makes it so it could be worse. You think Kirsten Dunst is bad? Well, you could have had Tara Reid as Mary Jane. That's a whole nother level of bad acting. And the first choice they wanted was Kate Hudson, but she declined it to do another film. And I really wish Kate Hudson decided to do this instead of the Four Feathers, because who the hell remembers the Four Feathers? And her career hasn't really ended up doing that much, lately. But anyway, yeah. So Kate Hudson, I think she's beautiful. She's a beautiful woman. I think she's a decent enough actress. I think she would have been better than Kirsten Dunst. But either way, she would have not really, been that great in this movie because the character Mary Jane is written so poorly in this film. It's one of the biggest problems of this movie too. She's a victim of an abusive family, and the dialogue she's given when she's talking with Peter just sounds awful. There's a lot of things about this movie that just don't work, in my opinion. The dialogue is just cringe-inducingly terrible at points, especially the whole scenes with Mary Jane and Peter Parker. It just feels so fake. Like nobody talks like this. The whole scene where he basically Mary Jane. This whole sequence. Has he mentioned me? Yeah. What did he say? I said he asked me what I thought about you. And what did you say? I said, Spider-Man. I said, the great thing about MJ is when you look in her eyes and she's looking back in yours, everything feels not quite normal. Because you feel stronger and weaker at the same time. You feel excited at the same time, terrified. The truth is, you don't know what you feel except you know what kind of man you want to be. It's as if you've reached the unreachable and you weren't ready for it. I don't, just a bunch of fucking poetry that just doesn't nobody would say that. That's the typical sort of dialogue that you hear in this movie. It's not terribly written. I think it's terribly written because it doesn't fit. It's like this movie is trying to be a campy 60s superhero film, but at the same time trying to be some, poetic movie, and then at the same time trying to be a modern day sort of hip 2002 film. It just doesn't blend together. It doesn't work. And there's other times where it tries to be like, it's definitely in terms of the way it's shot and the way it's edited, trying to be like Burton's Batman, especially the scene where he's chasing after the robbers who killed his Uncle Ben. Oh, he didn't kill his Uncle Ben because Sandman killed him. The way it's lit looks totally like something you'd see out of Burton's Batman film or something he did in Darkman. There's a lot of other shots in this film with the way that, especially the editing, and like when he got bit by the spider, when Peter got bit by the spider and is huddling up in the blankets and having a nightmare or whatever. Like when you see like his skeleton and you see all the spiders and all that. That's totally like something straight out of a Darkman hallucination scene. And the whole shot where he's sitting on top of a gargoyle after the guy who killed his Uncle Ben died. That's a shot straight out of Darkman too, because Darkman sat on top of a gargoyle as well. It's not really a gargoyle. I think it's a griffin in this film, but yeah, there's a decent amount of stuff it's like the first half of the film was actually kind of gritty and dark, and then after Uncle Ben dies and he becomes Spider-Man, it just has a whole different vibe, and I don't understand it, and that's why I don't really care for the film in the long run is because it feels to me like it's two different movies. It feels like in the beginning, it's this dark, sort of gritty take on Spider-Man. You know, it has some corny, sort of goofy moments. A source of moment is stuff at the the science lab with all the spiders and all that. And but I could deal with it, and the stuff with in the high school. But I could deal with that because it was felt like something out of comic book, and that's okay. But as soon as he, the whole sort of thing where he gets revenge, it kind of had a sort of gritty vibe to it. And then it just says, no, we're not doing that. We're going to campy 60s Spider-Man route. And I just didn't care for that. I thought the scenes when he finally became Spider-Man and the whole montage scene where he's saving people and stopping burglars, and you had the sequence with the people being interviewed what's about Spider-Man, I thought was horrible. I thought that was cringe-inducingly terrible. I thought the dialogue was awful. I thought everything looked fake as hell. Nothing anybody said seemed at all real to me. And I understand it's a comic book movie, but it got to the point where it was like, you know what? I feel like I'm watching a cartoon, and if I'm going to watch a cartoon, Spider-Man cartoon, I'll just watch this 90s Spider-Man cartoon. There are actually moments in this movie where I swear to God, they were more unrealistic and more cartoonish than the 90s cartoon was. The 90s cartoon had more depth and more character and more emotional impact than this entire movie did. And same thing about some episodes of the 70s live action TV show. It's cheap, and it really, had a lot of limitations, but it felt real. The situations felt more real than anything in this movie, and I understand that's what they were trying to go for. But that worked for kids, but as an adult, it just doesn't work anymore to me. I think movies like Captain America, the Winter Soldier work so well because it balances the comic book elements with with real life so well. It's not like, I'm going to bring it up, Nolan's Batman films, at least The Dark Knight Rises for me, which is just realistic, and then has comic book elements, but then they don't fit. Especially with the flying tumbler and shit. More of that in the future. But this film, it was just over the top. It was corny. It was cheesy. It was just didn't work half the time. The stuff with the Goblin was just cringe-inducingly awful. The whole scene where it has some good dialogue where Goblin's talking to Spider-Man, and, he's trying to tell him, he should join him. But the way it's portrayed is a fucking joke. Goblin's sitting around. He's like, he's got his arms crossed and sitting against the metal, he's just like talking to Spider-Man like they're bros. It just doesn't fucking work. And, the dialogue, the whole scene where, the itsy bitsy spider went down the water spout. Down came the goblin and knocked the spider. It's terrible. I mean, this whole scene. Good dialogue. Wake up, little spider. You're not dead. Not yet. You're an amazing creature, Spider-Man. You and I are not so different. I'm not like you. You're a murderer. Well, to each his own. I choose my path. You chose the way of the hero. And they found you amusing for a while, and the people of this city. But the one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fall. Die. Try. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Why bother? Because it's right. And then he just slaps Spidey on the head, and then he just sits down like they're bros at like some fucking, like at a frat house or something. It's just not the right vibe. Here's the real truth. There are 8 million people in this city, and those teeming masses exist for the sole purpose of lifting the few exceptional people onto their shoulders. You, me, we're exceptional. And then he grabs Spider-Man by his neck. I could squash you like a bug right now, but I'm offering you a choice. Join me. Imagine what we could accomplish together, what we could create, or we could destroy. Because the deaths of countless innocents in a selfish battle again and again and again until we're both dead. Is that what you want? I like that line, cause the deaths of countless innocents in a selfish battle again and again and again until we're both dead. Is that what you want? Think about it, hero. See, I didn't mind that scene. I didn't mind that line of dialogue or that performance. But the whole scene where he just slaps Spidey on the head and just sits down, he's a fucking like, it's like we're bros. It just doesn't fucking work, and it ruins that scene for me. And that scene exemplifies the whole, fucked up tone in this movie. I think Spider-Man 2 did a much better job with that. It still remained serious, but still had the comic book elements. Here it was just campy. It was goofy. And the whole sort of scene where Spider-Man goes in to save somebody in the burning building, and it's the Goblin, and he's shrieking like an old woman, like, I don't understand this. And then Matrix-inspired fight scene with the blades. It's dated. The whole stuff where you had, anything with Matrix type fight scenes that aren't the Matrix is really, really dated now. And the acting, like I said, even the acting from bystanders was just awful. Like, you had the whole thing where the woman's like, my baby, oh please, Spider-Man, somebody help my baby, somebody go up there and get my baby. I understand, people, act distraught, but it just didn't seem real. It didn't even seem like real distress. It just seemed like really awful, bad cartoon voiceovers, but in real life. It just doesn't fit. And, but not everything about the movie is bad. There's some decent action sequences. When they don't look like stunt show choreography. I actually, even though it was a little bit dated, the scene in the burning building, I actually didn't mind that. That was a decent little bit of action. And, some of the source, the whole, decent bits of action and things like that. The wrestling scene I liked. With Bonesaw, and I didn't mind the whole scenes with Uncle Ben. I thought that was really well shot. The stuff with Aunt May was well done. The scene where some good bites of dialogue, like I said, we want to die, destroy each other, killing countless of people in the process. But that scene was kind of pretty much ruined because of its bad tone. It's like it didn't take itself seriously, and I understand it's not supposed to because it's a comic book movie, but even Superman the movie, is as campy as it was at points, it had a certain seriousness to it. There's not one point in this film where you really felt that there was really a big threat or that anything was really honestly, that, things weren't going to work out in the end. That's one of the big things. There's no, watching the movie, it's like, yeah, the Goblin has these kids in this tram, and he has Mary Jane, he's going to drop them. But Spider-Man's going to save them. Like, you never feel for one instant that that Spider-Man isn't going to win. I think that's a big problem. There's not really a lot of emphasis on anything that really made you feel that Spider-Man might not be able to pull this off. And I think some of the best superhero movies have that. Superman the movie had that. Superman the movie did a great job with that. Superman the movie had the whole scene where he's got kryptonite and he got thrown into the pool, Lex Luthor's hideout, and there's a rocket headed for Hackensack, and he's not going to be, he's only going to be able to save one of them. He can't stop both missiles, and he ends up not being able to stop the one that hits the San Andreas fault and ends up killing Lois Lane. Of course, everything works out all right because he spins the world around. But there's nothing like that in this movie where you have that moment where, things might not be okay. Like, Goblin shows up and terrifies his Aunt May, but she's fine. She didn't die. She's fine. Oh, the yellow eyes, evil, deliver us from evil. Finish it. It was just really bad. That whole scene sucked. Deliver us from evil. Finish it. It's really bad. And then the whole scene where Norman is acting weird at the Thanksgiving table, at Thanksgiving dinner, and Harry Osborn. I thought James Franco's performance in this was one of the worst of his career. He was really bad in this. I think it was partly because he was given shitty dialogue and a shitty character, where all he is in the last half of the film is the boyfriend of Mary Jane, and then he has to get disappointed because Mary Jane actually secretly has the hots for Peter, and then Peter wants to, get with Mary Jane, but then at the end of the movie he says, we can't be together, I don't love you, and then it's just, I don't get it. I don't understand. But I just think James Franco's performance in this was pretty bad. And then I can't blame him because he wasn't given a good character, and he wasn't given good writing to work with. Willem Dafoe, the whole stuff, he's just talking to himself. The whole scene where he tries to trick Spider-Man, when he says like everything's fine. The whole scene where he's talking to him, like, is somebody there? Somebody. Somebody? Who are you? Don't play innocent with me. You've known all along. Where were you? Oh, the cold shiver running down your spine. Then he sees the mask on the chair. I'm right here. I don't understand. Did you think it was coincidence? So many good things happening for you, all for you, Norman. What do you want? To say what you won't, to do what you can't, to remove those in your way. The board members, you killed them. We killed them. We? Remember your little accident in the laboratory? The performance enhancers. Bingo. Me, your greatest creation. Bringing what you've always wanted. Power beyond your wildest dreams. And it's only the beginning. There was only one who could stop us. Or imagine if he joined us. And then that's the whole thing where then he goes in and tries to get Spider-Man to join him. And the whole scene with the boardroom I thought was terrible because I didn't buy it. I don't buy that a group of executives, I don't care how many board members decide they're going to sell a company, that they can overrule the guy who owns the fucking company. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I think the buck stops at the guy who owns the fucking company. I don't care how many board members decide to vote on selling the company. The buck stops at the guy who runs the company. Doesn't it? If it doesn't, then the business politics are pretty fucking screwed up, if that's the case. Because I think that's a bunch of bullshit that a bunch of board members can just decide behind closed doors to sell a company to a rival and, push out the guy who owns it. I think that's a bunch of bullshit, but I could be wrong. Maybe business politics is that fucked up. But really, I just thought that was pretty bad. And there was a few moments where Goblin actually, he was over the top, but he was intimidating. I have to admit, he was intimidating. I mean, not with that fucking green Power Ranger costume get up he's got going on. And fuck, all he's missing is a fucking flute. All he's missing is the Green Ranger's flute for that costume. Put a Green Ranger helmet on that Goblin costume, and you got a Green Power Ranger. I don't know what they were thinking. Why did they not go with the Goblin effects that were created by, I think it was Steve Johnson, I think, in ADI. Or it was Steve Johnson, or it was, I think it was Steve Johnson and his company. I don't think that's ADI. I think that's the other guys. I think that's Tom Woodard and Al Gillis. Why did they go with the Goblin? Because it looks ridiculous. You already have what? It looks, that doesn't look ridiculous. A guy in green plated armor with a fucking Goblin mask. That doesn't look ridiculous at all. Why don't you just go with the actual Goblin mask from the comic? Or go with the redesign that I saw, with one of the designs that I saw in this Making of Spider-Man book, which I bought when the movie came out. See, it was a huge thing. I bought the toys and I bought the book. It was big. And saw the movie on opening night. But what I'm getting, I have the book, and they have a Goblin design. It actually works pretty cool. It incorporates the green and purple, which you don't see any of the purple in this, except maybe Osborn might be wearing some purple, but not the Goblin. Goblin's all green. I understand that. He's called the Green Goblin, but purple is part of his costume design. And in this design, it's actually pretty cool. It's got the armor thing. He's even got wrist gauntlets, kind of like Batman. But I thought it was pretty cool the way they designed it. And it's got a goblin, a face. And it looked like it could be done practically. It could be done pretty well. I don't understand. I thought that design was the best, but they didn't go with that. I wish I could show it to you, but I can't find the picture. But anyway, Goblin, there was moments at least, even despite his ridiculous costume, that he was intimidating. I mean, the stuff where, MJ and I, we're going to have a hell of a time. Or the whole thing where, had you not been so selfish, your little girlfriend's death would have been quick and painless. But now that you've really pissed me off, I'm going to finish her nice and slow. So, I didn't mind that. I mean, there was definitely moments of intimidation with this character. when he breaks into Jameson's office and grabs him by the throat, asking where Spider-Man is, where Peter Parker is. You know, there were moments. Definitely more than anything Dane DeHaan did in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So I have to admit, even as ridiculous as Willem Dafoe is in this movie and over the top, he's more intimidating. He's a better Goblin than Dane DeHaan was. But he's definitely more memorable. But it doesn't mean he was good. I mean, I think it's just the problem was the writing. The writing was one of the weakest parts of this movie. And the movie was put in the fast track in terms of the writing the screenplay and shooting the film. It was put on the fast track way sooner than it should have been because of some impending writer strike and directors. Like, it was a big strike of Hollywood, like all different types of, it was writers and directors, like huge big strike. And that didn't happen. Writers and actors strike didn't happen. And it ultimately did not happen. So there's no need to put it in the fast track. And I think in some ways that shows in this movie. It does kind of feel rushed in retrospect. Um, the whole scene where, you have the fight at the end between Goblin and Spider-Man. Cool slow motion explosion of the Goblin bomb blowing up, next to Spider-Man. And I thought that scene was awesome as a kid. Like, oh, they both get their shots in. But no, Goblin's the one that kicks Spider-Man's ass. The slow-mo punch to the face twice on Spider-Man. Spider-Man, all he does is pull down a wall on Goblin and then punch him a couple times. Goblin kicked his ass most of the time. And then he has a whole thing set up where he tries to trick him. And he's all like, misery, misery, misery. That's what you've chosen. I offered you friendship and you spat in my face. You spun your last web, Spider-Man. If you had not been so selfish, your girlfriend's death would have been quick and painless. But now that you've really pissed me off, I'm going to finish her nice and slow. I'm going to finish her nice and slow. MJ and I, we're going to have a hell of a time. And then he lunges forward with the thing, with the... It was like a spear. Tries to stab him. Spider-Man blocks it. And then he knocks him into a wall. That's all he did. And then he's like, Peter, stop, it's me. And he removes the mask. Shows that it's Mr. Osborn. It's like, oh, Peter, thank God for you. You killed those people on that balcony. The Goblin did it. I had nothing to do with it. Please, don't let him take me again. I beg of you, protect me. You tried to kill Aunt May. You tried to kill Mary Jane, but not you. I tried to stop it. I couldn't stop it. If anything happened to me, I knew it was you who would save me, and so you have. Peter, thank God for you. Give me your hand. I've been like a father to you. Be a son to me now. I had a father. His name was Ben Parker. Godspeed, Spider-Man. It was just so fucking random. Like, he's tricking him, blah, 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 blah. Godspeed, Spider-Man. And then the fucking Spider Sense finally activates, and he flips over the glider, and then it was a fucking joke. And then he's like, oh. And then he gets stabbed by the glider, and then he's like, don't tell Harry. Ugh. It was terrible. Terrible fucking multiple different shifting of tone throughout one fucking scene in the movie. That's the thing. The tone does not stay consistent throughout the whole movie, not one time. And that's really distracting and really hurts the overall quality of the movie. Because you have a scene that should be strong, and then it's full of fucking jokes for some reason. Oh, you're like, what? What is this? Freddy's dead? Kids. That's not it. I mean, this isn't Freddy's dead, now is it? I mean, Freddy's dead can be like that. I'm fine with Freddy's Dead or a Nightmare on Elm Street movie having humor in it. That's a big part of it. But I don't know. Humor is part of Spider-Man, but usually it's Spider-Man delivering the funny lines, not the bad guy. But that's just my opinion. I mean, people are free to feel differently. I just feel the tone was really, really off in this movie. And it's like I said, it was okay. I could watch it. I mean, it had the origin story. I'd probably say it's better, it's more true to tradition in this film than it is in Amazing Spider-Man. But I honestly, I was more interested in the origin story in the Amazing Spider-Man, with the whole stuff with his father and the whole aspect of that, and it's Peter's parents and the whole way they handled it with the Oscorp thing. And he goes in, he's trying to figure out what happened to his parents, and that's how he gets bit by a spider. The whole thing where a spider somehow got out of the cage, I don't know how, bit him, and then now he's wakes up and he's buff and he's got webbing and swinging webs at cans of Dr. Pepper. Because Dr. Pepper paid a lot of money to advertise in this movie, and Dr. Pepper better be in it. That was one of the most blatant examples of advertising in a movie I've ever seen. Then, he goes and wrestles, Bonesaw, doesn't get his money because the guy's an asshole. He lets the burglar go and says, it's not my problem. And then the guy ends up carjacking his Uncle Ben and shoots him. Good scene with Cliff Robertson. Cliff Robertson was good. Like I said, there was good things about this. Rosemary Harris was good in this as Aunt May. Cliff Robertson was good as Uncle Ben. His delivery of the line, with great power comes great responsibility is great. The whole scene that he had before he dropped off Peter at the library was good. Good acting by both Toby and Cliff Robertson. The whole stuff in the school I thought was really over the top. Just like a lot of the scenes in this movie. Like, even for a comic book, it was too much. He's slinging webs. He's shooting webs out of his wrist. And it's in the school cafeteria. And then he pulls the web back and it smacks Flash Thompson in the back of the head. And then he walks out, and he's got fucking webbing coming out of his wrist, connect to a school lunch tray, and nobody in the school is at all thinking this is fucked up or weird. And then he goes in the fight with Flash Thompson. He's dodging moves. He's doing Matrix moves, bending backwards. He does a fucking backflip in midair, like 5 feet. Like, he jumps like 3 or 4 or 5 feet in the air, does a backflip. And everyone's just like, normal. This stuff in this film is worse than the stuff in The Amazing Spider-Man, because nobody notices anything. Well, it's not really worse because nobody notices anything that made in Spider-Man either. He's throwing footballs at, football goalposts and denting them. He's smashing backboards. He's doing all this kind of shit. Nobody notices it. So I'm like, both movies mess that up. There's no reason to have Peter show his powers in public at all, except for maybe in some secluded warehouse somewhere where no one will see him. There's no reason to do that. There's no reason to have him fucking, showing off his powers, shooting webbing at a lunch tray, and smacking Flash Thompson in the back of the head, and, having webbing stuck to his wrist, and then he closes the door and it goes up and down for comedic value. There's no reason for that. There's no reason to have it be portrayed as a joke when he gets his powers. That's the way it was portrayed in this movie. Go, Web! Go! Ah! Smack into a fucking wall. I mean, I like the way it's done in Amazing Spider-Man better, even with the montage. He's skateboarding, but he's not doing it for comedic value. When he first becomes Spider-Man, even the stuff when he's wrestling, it's just a big joke. And then he becomes Spider-Man, it's still a big joke. Because then they have the montages, and then you have interviews with people for comedic value. I don't like that. That's another thing I don't like about this movie. It just seems like Spider-Man, a lot of the stuff with Spider-Man, there's not a lot of seriousness to it. And I understand it's not necessarily the most serious character, but he's not all just a big joke. And I think Sam Raimi did not handle that well at all in this movie. He did it a lot better in Spider-Man 2. But here, it's just the stuff where he's got his powers. It's a joke. Oh, look, I'm buff now. Oh, I can miss the bus. Oh, my hand got stuck on the thing. And my hands keep getting stuck on stuff. And yeah, I know they had that in Amazing Spider-Man, but that was handled better in my opinion. It was a joke too, but that made sense. He didn't know how to control his power, so he's got sticking to everything. Here, it's like it's only when it's convenient to the plot. And then the stuff with the webbing in the school cafeteria is worse than anything in The Amazing Spider-Man. Because, yeah, he smashes the he dunks the ball, smashes the backboard. They could look at that as some kind of, he's been working out, whatever. Denting the, a football post. Maybe nobody was paying attention. Here, everybody would have fucking seen that shit. Come on, everybody would have seen webbing shoot out of somebody's fucking wrist and sling a fucking tray in the back of somebody's head. And then they saw the webbing connected to the thing when they closed the door. Like, it's just, come on. So that's what I'm saying. It's portrayed as a joke. Becomes Spider-Man, you know, montage scene. The whole scene of the wrestling was a joke. I'm the human spider. Even calling the Amazing Spider-Man was meant to be as a joke. And then you have the whole stuff with Goblin, and he's cackling and being ridiculous and being a poor man's Joker. And I always thought the Goblin really wasn't like that. I remember the Goblin in the comics being cold, calculating, and genuinely evil. And, here it's the opposite. And, more and more I think about this movie, the more and more I don't like this movie. I mean, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. But then I'm like, this movie sucks. In retrospect, it does. It really does. I mean, what's the thing you remember the most about this movie? The fucking kiss. The upside down kiss, Mary Jane. That's the thing a lot of people remember the most about this movie, or Goblin's over the top acting. You don't remember a lot of stuff with Spider-Man in a movie called Spider-Man. What does he have? A slow-mo, fight scenes that last maybe 30 seconds with Goblin, and Goblin gets away? The fight scene he had with the Goblin at the end was lame. Should have been built up where he actually genuinely does kick his ass. Not majority of Goblin kicking Spider-Man's ass. You know, he saves Mary Jane in the what is it, like tram full of kids. Okay. Seen that before. I know there are people who prefer this over the second movie, and that's fine. But I retrospect, more and more I think about this movie, the more and more this movie sucks. It's not it's an okay bit of origin at the time, for Spider-Man, but the action sequences aren't memorable. There isn't a single one that I can say I really remember. The way the character is portrayed, Spider-Man starts out as a fucking joke. I don't appreciate that. You have consistently this Asian lady, Spider-Man, Spider-Man, it's like, what the fuck is this movie? Is it trying to be a serious Spider-Man movie or a joke or a cartoon? The tone, it's fucked up. It works in Darkman because that's the kind of messed up idea, and it works with Raimi's twisted sense of humor. And it's R-rated. This isn't rated R. It's PG-13, and you got this really goofy, campy-ass sensibility about it that just doesn't sit well with me. And he definitely cut down on that for the sequel. There were some moments here still in there, like that, raindrops falling on my head. But here it's even more evident. And I just think in retrospect, it's lackluster. It's not spectacular. It's not amazing. It's about as amazing as the Amazing Spider-Man reboot was. And, and I probably say I prefer that more because I was more into the story. I like the characters more. The characters in this just seem, I don't know, other than Aunt May and Cliff Robertson, Rosemary Harris and Cliff Robertson, just seem artificial and fake. And I understand maybe that was, it's a comic book movie. What do you expect? But I just think that's a lame excuse. It's a lame excuse to come to this movie's defense to say that, oh, it's a comic book movie, so it's just like the comic book. Isn't that good? I'm like, not necessarily. If I'm seeing a movie, I don't want to watch a comic book. I want to see a good combination of the two. I want to see cinematic qualities combined with comic book qualities. I don't want to just see comic book qualities. I saw a lot in this movie. I saw a lot of comic book qualities and not a lot of cinematic qualities. It just didn't seem to take itself seriously at all, at any point whatsoever. Even in scenes where it should be serious, like the Goblin going after Aunt May, it was not taken seriously. The stuff where, even when Goblin gets revenge, it looks silly. Shows up with this dude who looks like he stole Ivo's suit from inner space, and he just flies in, and then drops some bombs on him. And then you go back to the whole stuff when at the parade, and he shows up, and bad acting from bystanders. Look, whoa, it's Spider-Man. It's like, I understand. I don't believe people act that awful when they see stuff like that. Like, when I see police officers, I'm not like, going, oh, look, there goes the police! I mean, it's like, come on. Just stop being mini Jim Carreys. This isn't supposed to be comedy. Stop mugging for the camera, bystanders. Oh my God, it's Spider-Man. But look up there. It's bad. It just adds to the whole fucking just corniness of the whole thing. And then you have the whole sort of stuff with the Goblin shows up and Spider-Man fights him. Looks like a stunt show. Spider-Man saves Mary Jane. You know, even the web slinging scenes are they look very similar. There's not a lot of difference to them. Um, the score is good. Danny Elfman did a great job with the score, and the production design is solid. The the special effects are good. Some of the CGI is a bit dated now. Some of the action sequences are okay. But at the end of the day, I don't really have any desire to watch this again. So if that's the case, then the movie must suck. If I don't have a desire to watch a movie ever again, it must not mean that it's a time waster. It must not mean that it's a movie that I wouldn't mind watching again. It must mean it's a movie I don't want to watch again. So if I don't want to watch it again, then this movie fucking sucks. It's like an ultimate revelation while I'm doing this review. I was like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna say it's okay and not do the safe route? Well, I'm gonna be honest about it. I'm gonna be honest about it. The more and more I started thinking about this Spider-Man film from 2002, it's a piece of shit. It's forgettable. It's lackluster. None of the action sequences are memorable. It's a letdown. It might have been okay back in 2002 for a kid, but as an adult, I've seen a lot of superhero movies that are done way better than this and have better action sequences, have better performances, actually know what kind of tone they're trying to go for, are more entertaining, and it was watchable because it was on, and I decided to sit down and watch it. But I admit there were points where it did kind of drag a little bit, and I just think it's just a movie that I don't think it's held up well at all. And, I don't know why it gets a 7.3 out of 10 on IMDb, and it's way too high. But it's better than what we would have gotten with the Canon film. It's better than we would have gotten with James Cameron's movie with the fucking Spider-Man mating ritual and Spider-Man robbing banks and shit. It's better than that. But that's not saying much. I mean, that's just comparing two different levels of shit. And I gotta be honest, I think it's a shitty movie. I think more and more I think about it, the fact that I enjoy the 70s TV live action show, which is not the greatest thing ever, a little bit more, is not a good sign. And I just think about it more and more. It's like, what is there to enjoy for me? Over the top Goblin, hamming it up, Tobey Maguire being a really kind of a pussy Spider-Man. Like every single time he fights the Goblin in this movie, he doesn't ever get the upper hand. First time he fights him and he just manages to incapacitate his glider. That's it. But Goblin kicks his ass, smashes him against the side of a building. Second time he fights him in the burning building, he gets a few moments, does that cool move with the web where he slings, uses the web to his advantage and kicks Goblin in the face. Like that scene. But then what happens? He gets fucked up by all the Goblin blades from the Goblin bomb, and then he ends up getting cut, and then the next scene he has to go to the Thanksgiving dinner and drops of blood fall down, and he can't stop it because for some reason the spider sense doesn't sense the goblins here. And that's another problem. Why the hell does the spider sense just decide to work whenever the script wants it to work? Because if I remember correctly, Spider-Man spider sense is pretty reliable. Goblin isn't like Venom. He doesn't have the capability to block Spider-Man's spider sense. So his ability to kick his ass so easily at the end doesn't make any sense. And also his ability to consistently sneak up on Spider-Man and him not know something is wrong, like when he got into the burning building looking for somebody, somebody's baby or somebody else or grandmother or whatever, his spider sense should have kicked in. But no, this movie just wants to decide that Spider-Man's spider sense is just convenient whenever the script decides it will decide to activate, which is bullshit. So that's another thing I don't like about this movie. It does not really honestly do his spider sense justice at all. So you have all this ridiculousness. You have, and I'm like, that's another. Spider-Man never gets the upper hand on the Goblin. Like, what? He killed him with a Goblin glider. Goblin had the upper hand the whole damn time. If it wasn't for his spider sense just conveniently deciding to activate, he fell for Goblin's plan, hook, line, and sinker. His spider sense saved his ass. Not anything that Peter did, not anything that Spider-Man did. Spider-Man didn't have that one moment where he beat Goblin to his knees. Like in the comic issue with Gwen Stacy, which they were trying to go for, and they failed. Because Goblin is the one that had the most memorable fight scene in that end fight. Punches Spider-Man in the face twice in slow-mo. Spider-Man doesn't have that moment. Spider-Man has, I'm going to pull a fucking flimsy-ass wall on top of you and punch you a couple times. But nothing compared to the choreography they had for the Goblin. And I understand they're like, well, the Goblin knows how to fight. Well, bullshit. Norman Osborn takes fucking karate classes? What the fuck is this shit? I don't understand why you have that going on. Why Goblin has so much the bigger upper hand over Spider-Man. Goblin's powerful, but remember correctly, they're evenly matched in the comics. Goblin's not stronger than Spider-Man. And there's like another moment, like I think Harry's Goblin was, because he took an advanced dose. But I mean, the more and more, I'm just starting to rant. That's what it is. It's a fucking rant because I more and more think about it. There's not much I can do to recommend this movie to myself to watch it again. And if that's the case, then the movie sucks. And it's fine if you like it. That's cool. A lot of people love this movie, and that's fine. I just don't think it really honestly holds up that well. I think it's honestly quite lame. No action sequences are memorable. Goblin is ridiculous. His outfit is ridiculous. Mary Jane is a fucking useless. She's useless in this movie. She's just a damsel in distress. She has nothing else going for her character except to be Spider-Man's girlfriend. James Franco has nothing else to do for his character except to be Mary Jane's boyfriend who's about to get broken up. This is pretty much just there to be Mary Jane's boy toy and then lose her. Norman Osborn, played by Willem Dafoe, he's just being straight up Norman Osborn, not bad. Really think he would have been better if he didn't do the over the top Goblin. Just be Willem Dafoe. Just be, creepy Willem Dafoe without being Nicolas Cage Willem Dafoe. And Nicolas Cage was one of the people who was, could have been Goblin. And his Goblin would have been just as ridiculous. He didn't need to go over the top. Willem Dafoe is a good enough actor. He could have done it understated and it could have been even more effective. Just because it's a comic book movie doesn't give it an excuse to be a live-action cartoon. That's kind of what I'm getting down to. If I want to watch a cartoon, I'll watch the 90s cartoon. And honestly, I think that any episode of that show is better than this movie. And I feel the 70s live-action TV series Nicholas Hammond is better than this movie because at least it had seriousness to it. It took things seriously. It realized that this is real life. They're trying to make it a real life. And it pissed off some people because it didn't have any of the villains, but it did do a good job, in my opinion, in trying to ground Spider-Man. And that helped you relate to the character more. It helped you relate to the scenes. It helped it add a little bit more suspense. And here, in that Amazing Spider-Man series, Mark Webb series did that more too. And Spider-Man 2 did that. It made you relate more to this character and make him more, because he's mortal. Here, it just seemed like you never for once believed that anything was not going to end up okay in the end. And in my opinion, that's the kind of movie that doesn't really have a lot of rewatchability factor, unless it's. I mean, there's a lot of movies like that, that I enjoy too, but I think that's not the main thing. The main thing that I probably would say this movie isn't very good is not because of the whole thing where you don't have any suspense on who the hero's going to save the day. Not necessarily. I gotta go back on that argument because that's not fair. But the main thing for me, it just doesn't have a lot going for it nowadays. It's been surpassed by so many other superhero movies that are way better than this is. Batman Begins, Dark Knight, Captain America, both Captain America movies, Winter Soldier and the First Avenger, Iron Man and Iron Man 2. As many problems Iron Man 2 has, I'd probably say it's better than this. Thor. I think that's a better movie than Spider-Man, than the first Spider-Man movie. That's just Marvel stuff. I'd probably even say I enjoy Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds more than this. I just think more and more I think about it, it's kind of, I can't believe that we kind of let this sort of lazy, kind of half-assed Spider-Man movie go back in 2002. We're just like, it's better than nothing, but we could have had something so much better, and this movie just really was not much of anything. You had Goblin, he showed up, he looked like a Power Ranger villain or a Power Ranger, he acted like, he acted like a complete goofball. You had Spider-Man, but most of the scenes he was in were kind of not memorable, and he got his ass kicked. And then you had the whole stuff where, first gets his powers. It's a fucking joke. So this movie's great. What is so great about this movie? The score's good. Rosemary Harris and um, Cliff Robertson are good. They are good performances. The writing isn't particularly great. Cringe-inducing, like, fake-ass dialogue, like straight out of a fucking high school poetry notebook, which gives no chemistry between Mary Jane and Peter Parker, because you don't buy that these two would ever be together, let alone say this shit. And you have action sequences that look like stunt show scenes from a Universal Studios stunt show, or not even that caliber. You have an end fight scene which is just consistently consists of the villain kicking the hero's ass and tricks the hero, and then it's only up to, and then the tone is all messed up, and that's one of the biggest things. The tone just really kills the movie for me. What is it trying to be? It's kind of reminding me of watching Invaders from Mars remake. I hate that movie. Is it trying to be serious, or is it trying to be a comedy? There's that type of vibe with this movie. Is it trying to be serious, or is it trying to be a comedy? You have moments where it's trying to be serious, and then it's trying to be a 60s cartoon, and that just does not work well for me. So at the end of the day, that's one of the biggest flaws for the film. Let alone not really anything involving Spider-Man that is really that remotely memorable. The scene where he saves Mary Jane and the bunch of commuters. Make a choice, Spider-Man. It's like, okay. Rip off the ending of Batman Forever, will you? Then I've done better at Batman Forever. And I'd probably say that movie is better. And I don't think that movie's that great either. But that movie's better than this. And then you have the whole stuff with, I forgot to mention, I can't believe I didn't mention it. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is great. He's fantastic. He was born to play this role. He's some of the most entertaining parts of this movie is J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. I love watching those scenes with him. He's great. It's fantastic. It's totally the comic book character come to life. But I don't know. I just felt there was something with this movie. I just felt that it just had a lot missing. It had the sense of grandeur. It had the sense of amazing. It had the sense of spectacular when I was young. But as an adult, I just think this movie has been surpassed. There's been so many other better superhero movies that have come out since this movie that deserve a lot more praise and deserve to be considered some of the best and deserve higher ratings than a 7.3 that this movie gets. And I just don't think this movie's held up well at all. I think a lot of the stuff just it's not impressive. It doesn't impress me much. So what do I really want to say about Spider-Man? Except this is not how I thought it was going to be. I did not think this was going to turn into a rant. But I gotta be honest, like, there's nothing for me to watch. There's no possible reason I could think of for me to watch this movie again. I saw it so much as a kid. I already know what happens. And the things that do happen aren't really worth rewatching. Nothing's that spectacular. The special effects are okay. The fight scenes are mediocre at best to terrible to bad to just lackluster. The acting is mediocre at best to good. So it's like you have some mediocre at best acting from a lot of the people except for Rosemary Harris and I think J.K. Simmons is great. I think Rosemary Harris and God, I keep forgetting his name. Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben is really well done. But I think Tobey Maguire's performance is mediocre at best. I think Kirsten Dunst's performance is mediocre at best. It's better than it is in Spider-Man 3, but it's not saying much. I think the guy who plays Flash Thompson is a waste of space. I think Harry Osborn's performance is awful. I think Norman Osborn's, I think Willem Dafoe's performance as a Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, is mediocre at best because his performance as Norman Osborn is good. His performance as Goblin is way too over the top. At some points, when he tones it down enough, and it has a little bit of over the top quality. It's fine, but then the dialogue he's given is fucking terrible. So I don't think he really could have done much with that anyway. So take it for what you will. I just find the movie to be incredibly lackluster in retrospect. I was honestly disappointed when I watched this again. I was expecting better, and I was expecting the grand adventure, the amazing movie that I saw when I was a kid, and this just wasn't it. It just didn't do it for me this time around. And it's not because I'm becoming cynical. It's because I just think, it could have done better. Could have been so much better. Better action scenes. Better better portrayals of the characters. Don't portray Spider-Man when he first becomes Spider-Man as a joke. That's honestly a slap in the face. Better lead. Somebody other than Tobey Maguire. He's tolerable, but you could do better. And Willem Dafoe, play the Goblin, but do it seriously. Take it seriously. Goblin isn't the Joker. So anyway, what else to say? I've gone on for over an hour. But yeah, turning to a rant. So I hope you guys enjoyed it anyway. I hope you guys enjoyed it regardless. And I really don't know what to say because I'm rated out of 5 stars. It's not the worst thing ever, so I'm going to give it 2. 2 is a poor. 2 stars out of 5 is a poor rating. So I think it's a poor film. I don't think it's a 1-star film. I don't think it's a 1.5-star flick. It's got enough going for it at points that it's better than that. It's not a total piece of shit, but it's not a good movie. Not what I would call a good movie. Because it doesn't have any rewatchability factor for me. And if that's the case, it's not a good film. It's a poor movie for me. If I have no reason to watch it again, then that's a poor film. I just think a lot was lost in translation, so to speak. I think the approach Sam Raimi had promise, but I think he bungled it up. I really think he fucked it up. The whole 60s aspect of the comic would be interesting, and that's fine. I think he should just done a throwback movie then. Should have been a throwback film. It should have taken place in the 60s. Is that what he was going for? But to have a 60s sort of vibe in a 2002 movie just doesn't fit. And then to have this whole bounce back and forth tone of comedy, campy, corny, and sort of gritty and realistic doesn't fucking work. It works in Darkman because that sort of idea is already kind of rooted in that sort of thing. And that's R-rated, and also it works in Darkman because that's a better movie, and that's a lot. That the writing in that movie is better. The jokes in that movie are better, and yeah, I'll use that word again, childish. And I think that Spider-Man is much more than that. I think he's much more than a childish cartoon character. I think has a lot more to his character than that. And I think that this movie is just really, really, really childish. And as an adult, I'm really seeing that. And as a kid, loved it, of course, because it was made for kids. As an adult seeing it now, it's not made for me. It's made for kids. And there's some movies I can enjoy. They're made for kids. But as a Spider-Man film, that's disappointing to me. That's disappointing, to me right now, to think that the Spider-Man movie was just made exclusively for kids, pretty much, for young adults. Because there isn't much to go off of for, grown-ups, unless, and that's fine. If you like it, if you think there is a lot to go off of, cool. And you like that idea that it's a straight-up comic book movie, and it's not taking itself seriously. But in my opinion, I see the opposite. I see a movie that's not taking itself seriously, but at other moments is trying to take itself seriously. And that just isn't a good vibe. And I see a movie that could have been so much better. And I think that's partly due to they rushed the movie. And I think now, in retrospect, it does show that they rushed this production. And I never saw it. I never looked at this movie through this type of viewpoint before. I never did. I always liked this movie. But I can see why there people aren't fans of this. And I can see why people are fans of it, though, too. So if you're either one or the other, doesn't matter to me. But this is my opinion, and I thought the 2002 Spider-Man film sucked. I thought it was a poor adaptation. I thought there were some good things going for it. The origin story wasn't that bad, but it wasn't that interesting. And I thought overall the film was just lackluster this time around. This kind of same sort of vibe I get with the first X-Men movie. And I could still watch that, but I still think at the end of the day, that's kind of a poor film too, because there really isn't much memorable about it except for, well, I haven't seen it in a while, so I can't really be honest on that. But I remember X-Men 2 being so much better than that first X-Men movie. So I think I kind of feel the same way about this. Like Spider-Man 2 is so much better than this movie. In almost every aspect. Better story. Not better jokes, but that's not the point here. Raimi, I think he learned from his mistakes in Spider-Man 2 and said, the first one was too campy, the first one was too corny, this first one was too comic booky. I'm going to try to bring it back to the reality and so forth. And I'll have some of my trademark stuff with Bruce Campbell's, and Cameo and, all of that, and the guy in the elevator and all of that and so forth. But, I'm going to pretty much, I'm going to leave it, I'm going to try to give some more reality to it and kind of, pull back on the campiness. But that was the right choice. It was the right choice. Spider-Man is not Superman. I think that's another thing. Raimi, I guess, was really inspired by Donner's Superman. You could tell it with the way he had the Peter Parker Spider-Man sort of angle. And I think Spider-Man and Superman are two completely different characters. Spider-Man has flaws. Spider-Man isn't a Boy Scout. Spider-Man is an impulsive young teenager, and you didn't get that sort of aspect with Tobey Maguire in this either. Not impulsive, not really technically that young, and yeah, I guess it's more based on the Steve Ditko one where Spider-Man, where he's a nerd, and that's fine, but that's not particularly interesting. I don't want to see nerdy Spider-Man, nerdy Peter Parker. I prefer impulsive, brash, young, witty Peter Parker over nerdy Peter Parker any day of the week. Because then nerdy Peter Parker is just nerdy Spider-Man, and I prefer witty and brash, impulsive Spider-Man over nerdy Spider-Man any day of the week. And that's just me. And that's perfectly fine. People like this movie. I know I've repeated myself a bunch of times. I know it's over an hour. But this is just an interesting one for me to talk about. This is one that I thought wasn't going to take that long. But then the more and more I thought about it, the more and more I just realized that I don't like this movie anymore. So anyway, thanks for watching. And I'll see you guys later. See ya.